Negative thoughts can be incredibly difficult to navigate. Many of us have negative thoughts. Many of us have a lot of negative thoughts. And most of these thoughts, if not all of them, stem from something that happened in the past, stem from some sort of a trauma, some sort of an incident or an event. Maybe something didn't end up the way we wanted it to. Maybe we faced some sort of an embarrassment or difficulty. Maybe we ended up just not feeling happy in a particular moment. And it can really vary depending on the individual, depending on the circumstance, depending on, the actual life trajectory. But all of us, I think we can agree, have had our fair share of negative thoughts. And as I mentioned, many of us still struggle with them today. The common response, whether we know it or not, is to try to resist those negative thoughts, to almost pretend like they don't even exist, to maybe push them, sweep them under the rug, hide them in the periphery of our existence, the periphery of our minds, and hope to never travel there ever again. But no matter what, no matter how hard we try to resist and push away, those thoughts still kind of creep through into our lives. If it's a fear of something, right? If that negative thought manifests as a form of fear. Well, until we actually conquer that fear, anytime we are faced with an opportunity or an obstacle that brings to mind that fear, guess what? That fear will dominate our emotions. It will dominate our sense of being. It will weigh down on us. It will feel like an anchor has been placed on our chest. And rather than having the motivation to push through that fear, to maybe try something different, to maybe try a different outcome and take a different road, we might be tempted to do what's safe or what we consider to be safe and retreat away from that issue. Do what we've done all these years, not try to change anything because we're afraid of what may come. Fear is just one negative emotion, one negative thought that we can have. There are so many other kinds of negative emotions and negative thoughts, whether it be being jealous of someone, being angry, being insecure, feeling hopeless, feeling disconnected, feeling like you're alone, feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like you'll never find the person that you're supposed to be with. As you're starting to picture, hopefully, there's so many negative emotions and thoughts, many of which I probably can't even describe off the top of my head. That's how many there are. But you know what they are, right? If you're listening to this video, if you clicked on this video, chances are it's because it's piqued your interest. And there is something that you're grappling with at this moment. And you want to uncover the solution. You've been resisting and resisting and resisting, but to no avail. Those thoughts still keep coming up. Now, negative thoughts are not just there arbitrarily, right? They're there for a reason. And the reason isn't just simply because that's how our life ultimately turned out, right? The reason isn't just that we're afraid to do something because we're afraid of failure or we're afraid of the same outcome, or there's a deeper reason to fear in this example. And I kind of alluded to it earlier, if you happen to pick up on it. But really, the purpose of all of these negative thoughts is to challenge you and to almost kind of even provoke you to see things in a different light. You see, the spiritual transformation journey cannot occur unless you go through some sort of a struggle. You hear it a lot referred to as, the dark night of the soul. And there's a lot of people that, talk about that. And I've certainly spent a couple of videos talking about it. But it's much more than that, right? It's not some period or a specific challenge. It's really your entire life, if you think about it. You're always facing challenges. You're always facing difficulties. You're always having to experience some sort of a resistance. But as we all know, resistance is there to only test our strength. And the more resistance we have, the greater opportunities we have to also grow stronger. That's the whole premise behind, training with weights, with weightlifting, for example, or doing any sort of sport. You do something until you reach a point of failure, or until you reach, that burn that you want, and your body gets tired. But then the next day it learns, right? When you go to sleep, it codes all of that training, and it not only produces a mental effect, right? A physiological effect. It tells your mind that, you can do this. It prepares you for that, but it also produces a physical effect. Your muscles become bigger and stronger. Your fibers become more adept at responding to the different stimuli that you're presenting them with. And you'll see day by day, week by week, month by month, you become more proficient at whatever it is that you're doing. And you're able to raise the resistance, or you're able to increase the duration. If you started with only being able to run 9 minutes a mile, maybe after a couple of weeks, that 9 minutes becomes 8.5, or it becomes 8, and it becomes 7. It's because your body is adapting to that resistance. This makes so much sense and is so relatable when we talk about physical activity, when we talk about the physical body. But somehow, not many of us apply this or transfer this 100% to the mental or the spiritual. And I think that's what's sometimes difficult for us, right? When it's a physical problem, it's there, we can see it, we've seen others do it, and it becomes a lot easier for most of us, maybe not all of us, but for most of us, it becomes a little bit easier than, say, a mental or an internal or a spiritual challenge, because that's all hidden. That's all within, right? It's not like your thoughts are projected on a screen and you can watch every single one of them from start to finish, and you can press pause and you can press rewind, etc., and take notes. It'd be nice if it worked that way, but unfortunately, we don't have that technology just yet. But in all seriousness, if you think about it, your series of negative thoughts, whether it's one thought or a bunch of different thoughts kind of combined into one, is that form of resistance. And no matter what, you're never going to fully eradicate negative thoughts. In fact, the point is not to eradicate negative thoughts, right? It's like you going to the gym, and rather than lifting the dumbbell, you just pick it up and throw it at the mirror, right? You're not going to destroy the dumbbell. You're just going to probably create a scene, in front of others, around others who probably are watching you and wondering if you're okay, and wondering if they should probably leave the gym. So the same is true with our thoughts. You're not going to pick it up and try to throw it, or brush it away, or hope that it just kind of magically poofs. The goal instead should be to observe those thoughts, to learn, to use them, yield that power. Because negative thoughts, just like positive thoughts, create an energy. And if you know how to harness that energy, you can use that energy in the best and most effective way possible. If you sometimes see, for example, there's some martial arts fighters that barely use any sort of force at all. They use the force of their opponent. So rather than just lashing out wildly and throwing punches and kicks, they let their opponent do that and get themselves tired and redirect that energy back towards their opponent. It's really beautiful, actually. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest taking some time, finding some YouTube videos on it, because it's very fascinating how so little effort of oneself is required in that moment. It's really just a transfer of energy. It's almost a little bit of a process of alchemy. But instead of taking something simple and turning it into gold, you're turning something negative into a positive. You're turning a negative thought into a positive situation. Because every negative thought and everything that that negative thought points to can be used as a platform for spiritual and personal growth. You experience the death in the family, for example. Incredibly difficult situation. I've had to go through it. I'm sure almost all of us have probably gone through it. And after the grief, and after the reeling, and after the abyss that we find ourselves in the weeks and months that follow, there's also a period of transformation, a window of transformation that comes from that. We develop a greater appreciation of life. We realize that there is more to life than just, the days that we're here, the life that we're living. We get a glimpse, maybe, of another dimension. It's not unusual for me to sometimes have dreams of people who have passed away, or to have messages kind of conveyed through those dreams. And to me, that's just a sign or a signal that there is another dimension, a dimension beyond life. But you see, that would have never happened. I would have never experienced those things had there not been a series of deaths or a single death in my family or in my social circle, because obviously people are dying every single minute. People are dying everywhere around the world, but it's not like they're always coming in our dreams. So that's just one example of how you can turn a negative thought into a positive situation. But what is needed here, right? It sounds almost easy, and by no means am I trying to kind of diminish the effort or the work, or to kind of oversimplify this, because to do so, I think would bring incredible injustice to the beautiful transformation that is spirituality. But let's be honest with ourselves. How do we yield this energy? If the weightlifter trains by going to the gym and lifting these weights and getting a good diet in place and putting together a good routine, how does the spiritual yearning soul develop that, sharpen that, and ultimately transcend, ultimately awaken, ultimately step into their true selves? And one of the most common and powerful tools that we have is obviously our own mind. How we shape our mind determines sort of everything else, right? And we have the ability to have some sort of a control over the body. And the thoughts, even though they stem from the mind, we're able to use our awareness, or our ability to perceive, our perception, to notice those thoughts. And believe me, there is great power in noticing thoughts. Notice how I didn't say there is great power in changing thoughts, or there is great power in eliminating thoughts, getting rid of thoughts. There's a lot of literature out there and teachings based on changing your thoughts. And it's true, some part of it is a change, right? I didn't kind of reference that alchemy. But before you can change, it's a process of just noticing, not wanting to change at all. You see, the human being is motivated by change, is motivated by growth, is motivated from getting from point A to point B. That's what drives a lot of us, right? That's what makes us want to get out of bed every morning, to be a better version of ourselves, to add to the progress that we have achieved thus far, to reach some sort of a goal. And hopefully that goal is more than just, how do I make more money, or how do I get the things that I want? Hopefully that goal, in addition to those things, in addition to satisfying sort of the personal and the basic needs of human existence, we're also pursuing and exploring these deeper goals. which is, how do we ultimately become who we are meant to be? How do we get out of this shell, this corporal, this bodily shell, to embrace and see the soul that we are? And as I said, changing the thoughts is great. We'll get into that. But first, notice them. And noticing means not resisting. In order to notice something, you have to not want to resist it. Right? If you want to notice all the things that your loved one does for you every single day, well, then your first step is to stop ignoring it, right? Stop treating it as if it doesn't matter, or stop taking it for granted. Actually notice it. See what's going on. See how they go the extra mile every single day to make your life just a little bit better. So see if you can notice those thoughts. And believe me, that's, for many of us, that's the most difficult part, because we don't want to confront our thoughts, especially the negative ones. We find it challenging. We find it difficult. We find it painful. It requires a lot of energy, or so we think. Sometimes it's just a matter of we've never really done it before, or we've never really been taught how to do it before, right? Because there is a way to do it, but then there's also a faster or a better way to do it, right? And that's something that, if you've been listening and watching a lot of the videos on this channel, you notice that where I usually stop or kind of draw a line is teaching you how to do these things. Because my belief is that everyone has a different way of learning the teachings. My goal has always been to share the teachings, to provide the teachings, to provide the principles behind what it is that we do, but to ultimately then give you the freedom, to give you the control, to give you that open road, if you will, to choose your path and to choose your destiny. So I hope that by providing these tips and these pointers, you'll come to discover a way that works for you. But what works for me, just to kind of give you an example, is being able to sit down. It doesn't have to necessarily be meditating, right? I think a lot of the times when we think of spirituality, there's always that image of, the monk or the guru that's sitting lotus position and eyes closed for hours and meditating. If that works for you, that's wonderful. And if you're seeing benefits from that, then continue doing that, or build on that. Establish a deeper foundation to go through with that. But not all of us operate that way, right? If you look at Eckhart Tolle, whom many consider to be one of the great spiritual minds of our generation, he doesn't do a lot of that, right? He's not, he's even gone so far as to poke at that a little bit, make some light fun out of it. But I'm probably in a similar camp as well too. My quote unquote meditation looks a lot different than perhaps what a lot of people think of as meditation. And that's not to say that one way is better than the other, but that's just to say that it's not necessarily the activity or the form that matters, it's the spirit that matters. It's the intention that matters, right? So whatever that form, whatever that activity, however it may transpire, make sure that you're paying more attention to the intention behind it. Because you could be sitting down on a mat for 2 hours, but if you're distracted about what are you going to eat for dinner, if you're distracted about, the argument you just had with your spouse or with your kids, then what was the whole point of that exercise? But let's say, for example, you're sitting on a train ride back home and you're obviously waiting to arrive at your destination, but you use that time for reflecting. Not just reflecting on your day and not just reflecting on the busy and hectic day-to-day activities, but really just reflecting on your life as a whole, reflecting on your being as a whole. Well, then you're doing more meditation sitting up in a crowded train than that person who is isolated, sitting down on a mat with incense and, yoga music playing in the background. But once you do find whatever form works for you, explore it deeper and use it as, think of it as, if you're, for those of you who are photography buffs, I took a class in high school, so I apologize if I'm, uh, you know, butchering the nomenclature of it, but pretend as if you're opening the aperture or kind of opening the lens of the camera to take in a bigger shot, to take in sort of the full breadth of that image. Right now, that aperture or that opening is incredibly small. Or for many of us, it's probably incredibly small, but with enough awareness, with enough insight, it becomes bigger and bigger. And we're able to perceive more. We're able to make sense of things more. So that's why I always say, when you're noticing your thoughts, see what arises. See what arises not just from the standpoint of your thoughts, but also how your body is reacting to it, right? I can say the word dog to someone, and someone might react differently to it than someone else. Someone might think of their poodle that passed away last December, while someone else might be thinking, what a nuisance. I don't like dogs, never liked dogs. FYI, I love dogs. I love animals in general. But just to give you an example, right? Words, ideas, thoughts, they all trigger us in different ways. And if we're not aware of the ways that we trigger, if aware of the ways that they trigger us, then we can't act upon that. We can't improve upon that. We can't move from a state of reactivity to a state of conscious intention, conscious action. So it starts with changing the mind by noticing the mind. When you notice the mind, when you notice the patterns that your thoughts are taking you down, and you're able to kind of piece those patterns together, you start to think, oh, now I know why when I see a dog, my mood changes. Now I know why when I see a dog, I don't want to eat, or I don't want to meditate, or I don't want to do anything. Maybe sometimes it's obvious, maybe sometimes it's not. A lot of times I've had to do shadow work or inner work on something that's been buried so deep into my subconscious, something that's been living there for years, gone unnoticed, probably something that I picked up during my childhood. And up until recently, I hadn't really given it the attention, or haven't really casted the light, shone a light upon whatever it is that was there. But subconsciously, that was holding me back. To go back to that example of fear, water has always been something that's fascinated me. It's mystifying, can be frightening. To me, it's been a little bit of both. I've always been scared as a kid of swimming in open water, but then there's also something about open water that is so calming and relaxing. And certainly with all the analogies that I've shared over the years through this channel, with the different Sufi poems and other spiritual poems talking about the ocean as representing God, or as representing oneness, and we are all just the drops, I've learned to see a different side of the ocean. And I've learned to shine a light upon my fear and realize, you know what, there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to sort of feel iffy about. Now, would I go out there and swim today in an ocean? I probably wouldn't, right? It's not something that I necessarily enjoy, but if I do find myself in the ocean, as I did recently, last year, in fact, it wasn't something that frightened me anymore. It was something that when I was in the water, I was just able to kind of let go and just sort of trust myself and trust that, everything's going to be okay. God is here. I ultimately surrender. And whatever fear I had, whatever sort of things, negative thoughts came up and developed over the years, there's not a lot of truth to it. So it's really about noticing these thoughts. Once you notice these thoughts, once you're able to understand the patterns, like I said, and to understand the connection that you have to your body, right? Does your heart race? Do you feel a tightness in your chest? Is there some sort of a stress that accumulates? Once you're able to really map it out and take it out from the inner world and bring it out into the external world so that you can make sense of it, well, then it becomes a little bit easier to tackle that specific fear or to tackle that specific negative emotion or negative thought. Because ultimately, the point here is not to just make sense of it and to be aware of it and then to hold on to it forever. The point, as I mentioned earlier, is to shift and transform that negative thought into a positive thought. Whatever sensitivities, whatever sort of harsh realities that we faced in life that made us a little bit more sheltered, made us more defensive, more willing to listen to our egos, we now have to unravel all of that. It's a great unraveling. And that's why you've probably heard me, say this quote, I think it was Ramana Maharshi, basically everything that you've learned at some stage in life, you're going to have to unlearn. Right? And if you think about just the profundity of that quote, everything that you learn, you're going to have to one day unlearn. Right? If you learned how to talk to people a certain way, you're going to have to unlearn that and almost kind of retrain your entire mind. And that's really what it is. It's retraining your mind. It's not changing your mind or replacing your mind with someone else's mind. Right? The same mind that was in Buddha was the same mind that he had as a child. It's the same mind. It grew. It's not like you swapped it out. It's not like you went to the forests of India or Nepal and swapped it out with someone else's and he had a better brain and he was more aware. It's that same brain. It's that same mind. It's those same tools, right? Just like going back to the gym, it's the same dumbbell. You're not changing the equipment, but you're changing how you use the equipment. You're changing your relationship to the equipment. And day by day, you start to see that your mind, through the power of God, through the power of intuition and insight, is showing you the way out of all that you have experienced, the way out of all of those individual negative emotions. In essence, your problems are the cure. Your negative thoughts are the source and the beginning of your positive ones, of your happy ones. And that's something that's so hard for us to understand. When we think of, I want to be happy, I want to stop feeling sad, we never think of it as, I want to use my sadness as a way to become happy again. Right? Because without one, we can never have the other. And that's, I think, the lesson that I'm trying to kind of impart here is to appreciate the beauty of both, to appreciate how both are intertwined together. Because ultimately, and this is the bigger spiritual lesson, there is just one. But of course, the natural path of spiritual evolution is to go from a state of grief, a state of emptiness, a state of despair, a state of unhappiness, to a state of peace, to a state of calm, to a state of understanding, to a state of lightness. Notice how I didn't say to a state of happiness, to a state of joy, because these things can be fleeting. They can come and they can go. Rather, you are replacing those negative thoughts, not with positive thoughts. You're replacing those negative thoughts with an understanding of thoughts to begin with. And that understanding, that awareness, gives you that sense of calm, gives you that sense of peace, knowing that I'm not my thoughts. I'm not whatever this story is that my mind is trying to tell me I am. I'm something much deeper than that. It's like you have to experience the positive, to experience the negative, to then all of a sudden experience a world where both can live together. And that is your true world. Your world before this world made an identity out of you, or this society made an identity out of you, or your ego made an identity out of you. So I hope this sheds some light into the wonderful process of analyzing and really noticing our thoughts, especially the negative ones, because they get a lot of flack. They're always attacked. They're never really truly understood. But if one truly spends the time, just like you would with your family, just like you would with your friends, spend some time with your thoughts. Chances are they will help you grow even more than anyone else you can spend time with. That's why they say, being alone can sometimes be one of the greatest blessings. To those of us who don't know how to properly use alone time, we view it as something to despair. We get feelings of loneliness, but there's no such thing as loneliness. You're never really alone. You're never really lonely. You have yourself. You have God. So how can you ever be alone? This is all these things that I'm sharing, right? All these things that I'm imparting is not just putting a lipstick on things and trying to be positive. It's actual real changes that I've seen in myself. And realizing that, wow, like there was a time actually where I did feel very lonely and I wanted people around me all the time. I wanted to always be around friends, but I've learned that, there's turn every negative into a positive until you realize that there is no negative positive anymore and you're totally at peace with that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit longer than some of my other videos, but it's a topic, as you can clearly see, that I think is really important. It's so essential to growing in life, to making the most out of our time here, because you know what, we're always going to have negative thoughts. We're always going to have, especially the earlier we are in our spiritual journey, we're going to be loaded with them. And that's not going to be the issue. The issue is going to be which ones do we tackle? How do we tackle them? How long is it going to take to address them? And ultimately what the transformation will look like. But regardless of, who we are, we're going to have those thoughts. We're going to have those things that we have to work on. But thankfully, those are the tools, those are the ingredients that have been put down in front of us that we can use to manifest our best life, to manifest our best self. So the next time you experience a negative thought, don't try to brush it away. Don't try to ignore it. Slow down, pause, see if you can really spend time with that thought. See what it can ultimately teach you, and then take the learnings from that teaching and ultimately plan a better life for yourself. Right? And if you have any questions or if you wanted any help with this topic, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always available, not just in this comments, but also if you wanted to reach out to me privately or directly, you can reach out to me through my website. I'm happy to jump on a call or do a counseling session to help, you kind of walk through how this could be done in your own life, but also maybe to answer some questions as well, because I know it is difficult. It's not something that we all naturally come across every day or talk to people every day. I totally understand where you're coming from. If you feel like this can be overwhelming or this can be a lot. So you're not alone by any means. We're all on the same boat. And I just hope you guys maybe learned a thing or two from this and that it helps your life in a meaningful way. Certainly that was the intent. If so, please don't hesitate to drop a like. Please also check out some of the other videos as well. If you like this video, I'm sure you will like some of the other videos as well, which all touch upon kind of similar but different themes. And yeah, with that, I really appreciate the time, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day and week ahead. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video.